Welcome to the Level Up Podcast, presented by The Ultimate Gamer, a show that features conversations with trailblazers, thought leaders, risk takers, decision makers, celebrities, athletes, and investors who are defining the gaming and eSports space. On Level Up, we take a journey into this dynamic industry and start to decode and reveal who and what's making news. It's about connecting, and it's about sharing the stories and vision of the people who make gaming and eSports a global phenomenon. And now, please welcome your host, student of the game, and connector to the esports community, Tommy Knapp.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tommy Knapp, and this is an all-new episode of the Level Up Podcast presented by The Ultimate Gamer. On today's show, I have a conversation with Darren Heitner, an attorney and Florida Supreme Court qualified arbitrator focusing on sports, esports, entertainment, intellectual property, litigation, and transactional work. In 2014, the American Bar Association published his sports law-related book titled How to Play the Game, What Every Sports Attorney Needs to Know. In between client calls, I was able to snag about 30 minutes with Darren to discuss the legal world of gaming and esports. We briefly covered subjects from registering trademarks early to valuation and deal structure of investments in esports. As a practicing lawyer, contributor to Forbes and Inc. magazines, professor at Indiana University of Bloomington, and founder of Sports Agent Blog, Darren stays extremely busy. His client list is a veritable who's who of professional athletes and orgs. As a trusted professional in the world of esports, he specializes in fantasy sports related gameplay, as well as website and mobile applications, copyright material, and promotional vehicles in conjunction with gameplay. If you want legal advice from one of the profession's top attorneys and you want to love your lawyer, you should start your search with Darren Heitner. And here is Darren Heitner.
Well, yeah, the legal. So being an attorney and yeah, UF, just kind of, I guess, start from the beginning, not from the crib, but.
Yeah, right. Well, look, I didn't always know that I was going to be a lawyer. In fact, what I think is really interesting is up through my 3 years of law school, I had this belief that I was never actually going to practice law. So I went to law school straight through undergrad, and I went to the University of Florida for undergrad and for law school. Didn't take a break in between, and knew that I was going to go to law school as soon as I set foot on campus in Gainesville, Florida, back in 2003. But yet again, during those 7 years, I really didn't think that I was going to be a lawyer. Maybe in the beginning I did. And then in 2005, I believe it was, or maybe it was 2004. No, it was 2005. Between my sophomore and junior year of undergrad, I had the opportunity to engage in an internship in Atlanta. And it was at a company called Career Sports Entertainment, now just abbreviated CSE, a sports entertainment firm that did everything from working with brands on sponsorship to activation. But they also had a client representative division where they were working with athletes, broadcasters, coaches on negotiating contracts, procuring contracts, really being a sports agent. And so that allowed me to get my feet wet in that industry. And I thought at that point in time, that's what I was going to do. So I kind of pivoted from potentially practicing law to wanting to be a full-time sports agent because I really enjoyed that opportunity during that summer. And that's when I created a website called Sports Agent Blog at the end of 2005. And again, eventually ended up pivoting from being a sports agent, which I did create my own sports agency, to being a full-time lawyer in 2011.
Yeah, you were talking about the fact that you had started a blog. You were at University of Florida, and you went in and you started a blog. I want to talk a little bit about that because you've written for Forbes, you've written for Inc., and now you started Above the Law as well, abovethelaw.com. So can you talk a little bit about your writing prowess and then how you started abovethelaw.com and what you guys talk about in that?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. When I was in high school, I was actually sort of a poor writer. I did not read many books. I don't flaunt this, but I got a perfect score on my SATs on the math side, but not so much on the verbal side. But I always enjoyed the writing and reading more than doing any sort of math. So while I was doing my AP subjects in high school, getting that out of the way, I knew that when I got into college, I did not want to focus on math whatsoever or take any math classes, which I did not do. So instead, I actually decided that I was going to start reading and writing. And after I completed that internship at CSE in 2005, I wanted to have a way to still stay in touch with the sports agent industry and to meet additional individuals who are prominent in that industry and learn as much as I could about the industry that at that point in time I thought I was destined to be a part of. And so I went back to the University of Florida, went into my junior year, and had some struggle sort of finding myself and finding what it was that I could do, albeit at a very early age, to learn more about the sports agent industry and also make those very important connections. And so what I ended up creating was Sports Agent Blog. And originally it was called I Want to Be a Sports Agent. And I created that as a New Year's resolution in 2005. It still exists today, roughly 15 years later. That was sort of the launch pad for me in the world of journalism. Again, I was not a journalism major. I was a political science major. I did have a mass communications minor that I was working on, but I didn't really have that sort of background in journalism. Yet creating Sports Agent Blog allowed me to start to create a name for myself, not only in the sports agent world, but also as a writer as a whole. And then from there, as you mentioned, I started writing for Forbes 7 years later. They took notice of what I had created with Sports Agent Blog and wanted me to focus on sports business with a hyper focus on sports agency. And then one of my editors at Forbes left to Inc. magazine. They didn't really have a sports vertical at the time. So she asked whether I could start contributing there in conjunction with Forbes. And I did that for many years until I decided to put that behind, focus a lot more on the law firm that I had been developing since 2014. And then ultimately, within the past year, started writing at a publication called Above the Law, as you mentioned, which is very much focused on legal issues. So that allows me to write primarily on sports law issues, but also they've given me the ability to write on sports business issues as well, even if they have no connection with law. So I love writing, whether it's for compensation or not. It's an opportunity for me to express my thoughts to others, and it's also indirectly helped me grow my brand and my businesses.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And right now, I mean, I know there's a lot. I just was looking at your Twitter. There's a lot going on. The Reggie Bush tweet that you just put out there. What is going on? And again, how do we determine? This is one of the things I'm just asking you, friend to friend and colleague to colleague. How do we determine what's fake news and what's real news? Because it looked like there was a post there that other people were responding to, but then it wasn't an actual post.
It's really hard in today's day and age, especially when many of us are getting our news from social media as opposed to from publications such as an ESPN. But even now you have Reggie Bush, who's come out, and he works for a rival, Fox Sports, but said that a headline on ESPN that was sent out as a push notification, which I received, was completely misleading and false. And I went back and read the article because when I first saw the push notification, I read the article. I then looked at the original piece, which was an interview between Reggie Bush and Playboy magazine. I didn't even realize Playboy magazine was still around. And I read the whole thing. And I say that as somebody who in college was actually the Playboy rep at University of Florida. And that's a subject for a different time. Great experience.
Right.
But,
Imagine.
I looked at what Reggie Bush said in the Playboy article, and it seemed to be a bit rambling and somewhat off subject because the question presented to him was something about whether he'd be interested in coaching. And then he went into whether or not college athletes may have issues with the name, image, and likenesses that they may be able to exploit in the near future. And then even in the same response talked about an issue with the global markets, I guess. I don't know. I wasn't really sure where he was going with it. So I can't necessarily fault ESPN while it took the information out of context by not obviously republishing the lengthy piece that Playboy ultimately published. The words that he said were words that he said. And right. I think the problem was that the headline was so flamboyant that it caused me and others to think Reggie Bush is not in favor of allowing college athletes to earn money off their names, images, and likenesses. And I think, so it wasn't necessarily false, but it was misleading. Whereas it appears now that Reggie Bush was actually just saying, look, if college athletes are going to have this opportunity, they need financial literacy. And I have a podcast. I started one a month ago. It's called How to Play the Game, which is the same name as a book that I wrote for the American Bar Association. And so I decided to just record a quick podcast yesterday when I saw the news. And my reaction was, look, I mean, first of all, should Reggie Bush really be the voice of reason on something like this? He and his parents took money while he was in school, and we want transparency. But otherwise, if financial literacy is an important component, which I agree with, look at what's being done. I mean, look at my state of Florida, which actually has a financial literacy component to the statute that's been passed by the House and the Senate. So let's all be educated about the issues. That's my point.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. And I kind of want to just ask you one quick question, because it's kind of going back, and then I want to jump into some of the things that you've done in trademark law and IP, and then you jump right into esports. And I know we don't have a lot of time again, but there's something that just caught my eye. It says, "I love my lawyer" on your website, right? And I agree with you. There's a lot of times, whether whatever people think about attorneys, but you must have come from a space when you created that "I love my lawyer" tag of, a lot of people don't have a good image of attorneys. So just, can you share a little bit about that, where that came from, and where that's, I mean, it does seem like most of your clients, based on a lot of the testimonials you see, do love their lawyer.
Well, I strive for that, and I think it's a good goal to have. I can't take full credit for the creation of the phrase. I think it's, I'm biased, but I think it's good branding for a profession that is oftentimes abhorred. I mean, you think about hiring a lawyer, you probably cringe. It's like, oh, I gotta pay somebody, probably not cheap. They're bad at communicating. They aren't exactly the best service providers. So the intention is sort of to have a shift in the mind of the consumer, where it doesn't need to be this sort of relationship that you abhor from the start, that you can actually enjoy the services that are being provided to you and love your lawyer. I mean, we go to an accountant, we go to a financial planner. These are all service providers. And I don't think that you have the same impression of those service providers as you do generally with the legal profession. So again, the concept is to sort of have a shift in the mind of the consumer. And where it originated from was actually one of my clients, one of my longest clients, which is a nutritional supplement company. And they had created a shirt that said, "I love pre-workout," because one of the products that they serve is a pre-workout type of supplement, something that you would take before you work out, get you going, get the energy up. And when they created that, they're like, oh, we also want to create a whole bunch of shirts that say, "I love my lawyer," just switching the pre-workout for lawyer as a token of appreciation. And I was like, oh, that's, first of all, really nice. It was a nice surprise. And I'm like, as somebody who's I don't fashion myself as only being a lawyer, but also a brand builder, especially because I do so much work in intellectual property. I'm like, wow, maybe we can really take advantage of something like this. Maybe this is a good way to sort of rebrand what I had created back in 2014, without necessarily focusing so much on a tagline and more about just building business through connections, relationships, which is still primarily how I get clients. But I thought this was a unique opportunity. Let's take advantage of it. And having the support of my client who actually created the tagline was pretty cool.
Yeah. So when do you decide, whether it's yourself or one of your clients, when does it come in? And my question comes to the Bill Raftery case study that I was reading on your website. Because he's been saying, tag these certain things that he says that he's, onions and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head.
With a kiss.
Yeah, with a kiss. So when do you determine, okay, I want to trademark something that it actually has value? And then when you do that, what's the process? And then after you actually trademark it, if you can, how do you monetize that?
Well, the best time to do it is in the infancy of a brand. And there's many reasons behind it. I'll touch on the major ones. First of all, you want to play defense. You want to make sure that when you're building a brand, you're not infringing on someone else's marks. The worst thing that you can do is put a lot of sweat and equity into the building of your brand and then find out later, whether it's weeks, months, years, that there's somebody else who was using that mark or a similar mark prior to you, and that now you're going to receive a cease and desist and or a federal infringement action against you that you're going to have to spend a lot of money on, and potentially have to spend a lot of money not only on litigation and legal, but also on rebranding. So from a defensive standpoint, it's really important to do that early on in the brand building process, but also from an offensive standpoint. So put yourself in the shoes of the company or person that I just referenced. So if somebody else comes along and decides to create a brand that's similar to yours, then you want to be in the position where you can send a cease and desist, where you can file a federal trademark action against them and potentially get statutory damages.
So Darren, can you, and I don't mean
the registration.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, but so give us an example, like using Riot Games, because I know Riot is someone you've worked with, I believe, right?
Yes. Well, so for instance, again, if there's going to be, if you create something as valuable as a Riot Games, right? So there is equity attached to that specific name. If somebody else comes along and tries to create another brand that, let's say, is even in that same specific area, which is video games, electronic related product services, then, and let's say they use Riot with something else, then you want to be able to be proactive and have a strong leg to stand on in sending a cease and desist, in filing litigation. And again, as I mentioned, if you don't have the registration, you can't file in federal court. And if you don't have the registration, you can't get statutory damages, which is a nice high set amount of money that you can earn based on that infringement. You also have the ability, by having a registration, you have constructive notice sent to the world that you are the owner of the mark. There's really no confusion at that point as to who is the true owner of that mark. And so that also lends to potential opportunities in licensing. If you have a valuable mark, you may be able to license it to third parties and just collect royalties. There's so many benefits to being proactive. And so you mentioned Bill Raftery with Onions and With a Kiss. I mean, that was actually a referral from a sports business reporter, Darren Rovell, who happened to be sitting next to Bill Raftery on a flight. And they got to talking about, what Bill was doing to protect his IP. Bill mentioned, at that point, nothing, but he wanted to leave behind some rights to his children and thought about the idea of creating new products, specifically apparel, to sell to the masses. And so we got to going. We had a conversation as to what may be protectable, what may not. And, he saw the value in paying a small amount of money for the extensive protection, which we were, look, it was a fight. The examining attorney that was assigned to us at first was concerned that there may be confusion with The Onion, the publication, the satire publication. So we had quite a bit of back and forth before receiving registrations, but ultimately we were successful.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the legal field right now, and I think it's absolutely fascinating in the esports industry, because it's a global industry and it's exploded recently. And there's so many areas just in the legal field that you can specialize in. I know trademark law, IP. I'm also looking at player contract negotiations, because I think when I'm seeing a lot of these players get involved, and I look at the Tfue FaZe Clan a legal battle from last year that's, I think, is still ongoing. Where do you see that? Are you involved with that? I know you represent a number of clients, and I don't know if it's on the player contract side with like Antonio Brown or Manny Ramirez, individuals like that on the traditional pro sports side. Where do you see that right now? Are we still much in the infant stages in the esports world and the gaming world?
I do think so. I'm not personally involved in the FaZe Clan litigation. I haven't checked up on it in quite some time. I am familiar with the allegations that have been made, and in particular, the allegation that there's been excessive fees, which I think is an interesting debate that's up for discussion, and something that we've actually litigated in the traditional sports context. I think the world of esports is providing legal services to the world of esports is very similar to the world of providing legal services to traditional professional sports. I've been able to build a brand, that being my law firm, to cater to professional athletes, agents, teams to an extent, and other brands that are in the world of professional sports, by not really focusing on specific sports related issues, because there are very few. There are specific issues. Let's say if there's a dispute between a player and an agent, those issues are brought in final arbitration through the players associations. And there's actually separate precedent that we look at other than case law, actual precedent in the arbitration system. So there are nuances where me as a sports lawyer, I have an advantage over somebody who really doesn't practice in the area, because I understand that there are distinctions from traditional litigation. But otherwise, look, we provide transactional support. We provide intellectual property support. We provide family law support, et cetera. So it's a lot of different traditional legal services that we're just simply providing to individuals and companies in the world of sport, with the caveat that there are nuanced issues such as agent versus agent disputes, player versus agent disputes, et cetera. Those issues within the regulations governing specific sports. I'd say the same thing is true for esports. There's less attention paid on the transactional side. I think more and more as the days go on, which is a good thing, because you don't want disputes based on ambiguity. You don't want there to be a lot of money to be spent on litigation, but to the extent that there is, again, an opportunity for lawyers. So it's litigation, it's transactional support, it's intellectual property. Did I lose you? Okay.
Yeah.
But the nuance, I believe, with esports, much like with traditional sports, with esports, you have a lot of companies that are trying to get involved in the space. And one of the prerequisites of being involved is that you have to have approval from a payment processor. If you can't take payments, then obviously you can't create a good commercial business model. So one area where we've done a lot of work is in helping these companies do advisory opinions based on the legality of their services, or helping them pivot, so that the services that they're providing is more in a gray area or absolutely approved, as opposed to having legal concerns. So that's one area that we've done a lot of work. We've done some work with investors or investment banks who have been interested in the space. Obviously, over the past 5 years, we've seen an influx in money in the esports space. So another sort of nuanced area is really having an understanding and appreciation of the industry to not only provide traditional legal counsel on these types of transactions, but also maybe assist a bit on the valuation component or how these deals should be structured. So
can you talk about that a little bit more? Maybe can you use Bitcraft as an example?
Well, I can't get into the details, obviously, because I've worked on that transaction, and to an extent there is attorney-client privilege that I have to respect. But we were involved in one of the rounds of funding, and a lot of the questions not only revolved around what is the best way to do this from a legal standpoint and protect our investment, but also, is this even a good deal? And so it's somewhat atypical for a law firm or a lawyer to be asked those types of questions. Typically, those are things that are asked to perhaps a business advisor. But there's a lot of one of the issues I've found in the esports space is there's a lot of people who hold themselves out on LinkedIn or otherwise as being an esports consultant or an esports specialist. But what does that mean? I mean, what makes that individual more qualified to provide an opinion like that than somebody else? I think in order to have that sort of expertise or to be relied upon, you just have, it comes from experience. It comes from being involved in the industry, whether, from my standpoint, I've been covering the industry longer than I've even been a part of it from a legal standpoint. So when I was writing at Forbes, I was covering esports before it was really sexy to even say the word, before people knew whether you capitalize the E, do you capitalize the S, is there a dash in between the E and the S? That was like the big debate 6-7 years ago.
Right, but that was only 2015. That's not that long ago.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I haven't really held myself out in that consultant role, but I find myself being asked those types of questions, and certainly in the Bitcraft deal, that was true.
And so when you talked about earlier that you've written a couple books, and I think it's what every sports attorney needs to know. Are you
how to play the game? Yeah.
How to play the game. Are you planning on writing something similar for the esports industry, or is it a little too far off or something like that?
So I was asked originally to write How to Play the Game, What Every Sports Attorney Needs to Know by the American Bar Association. I published that, I think, back maybe in 2012 or 13. And then I was asked again to do a second edition, which not only provided updates to the existing sections, but also added a few sections. One of them is eSports. So if there is anyone who's interested in sort of the legal components around eSports, you could pick up the second edition, which is available on the American Bar Association website and on Amazon.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, I mean, I haven't thought about maybe writing another book as of this time, but there's always the possibility.
I just think it's one of those areas. I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I was talking about it. And 5-10 years ago, it was not easy to find information on esports. You could Google it, and you'd get some things here and there. Now, when you Google anything about esports news, I mean, there's a plethora. It's just you get tons and tons of information. However, there's still very few, I think, high-level books that are out there that are written about esports that you can kind of grab a hold of and learn a lot from the industry, about the industry from A to Z. And I think based on some of the things, again, the case studies, work that you've done in the space, I think you have obviously a lot to offer. I love getting in conversations with you because just it drills down much deeper. A lot of the stuff that I get into on the podcast is very on the surface level. You don't have really a lot of time to dive really deep in. But as an attorney, you always have to do that, right? You really need to dig in deep, from all sides.
Yeah, that's true. Look, when I'm providing counsel, let's say on the transactional end, I'm always thinking with my litigator hat on. What if? No one enters into a business relationship with the idea that there's going to be a catastrophe or a disruption in that relationship, but I'm always thinking that there could be, because oftentimes there is. And so you're right. You have to think about everything in these types of circumstances and really do your best to shield, indemnify, and protect your client at whatever cost is necessary. So something I love to do, and hopefully I'll be doing it for decades to come.
Yeah, and I see match fixing, and I see the gambling is coming in. There's just so much that's going to continue to grow and expand. I know you got to run. I just want to ask you one last question about the Dolphins Business Combine. When did you meet Caleb, and how long have you been involved with the DBC?
Known Caleb for many years now. I was actually connected to Caleb through a mutual friend who started his career as a business manager to many athletes. And he referred me, actually, Draymond Green, who was one of my first clients when I started on my own. And just built a really strong relationship with Caleb, I'd say, over the past 5 to 6 years, where Caleb's become a client as well. We've worked with him on the Athlete Transition University, been involved with the Dolphins Business Combine, just love to do what I can to help him, to help the franchise, to help the players. I mean, this past year was amazing with the shark or the fin tank, and working with so many really entrepreneurial minds, and stayed in touch with many of those players, and hope to be able to help them out in the future.
Yeah, it's incredible that they're given 3 hours to put a business together and a marketing plan and a sales plan, and then they have to pitch it to the Sharks or the Fins in that quick amount of time. So, listen, I know you've got a hard stop at 11. We're already
I've got to run.
Over. Yeah, so thanks very much. Looking forward to it. Hopefully we can do this more often.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right, thanks, Darren. Ciao.
I'd like to thank Darren for sharing his time, experience, and knowledge with us today. This is an area of gaming and esports, the legal side of things. Contract negotiations, governance, gambling, endorsements, intellectual property, etc. The list is exhaustive, where expertise is critical. Darren understands it, and with a love your lawyer mentality, makes sure his clients are both informed and protected. This got deep quick, so listen again and or find timestamp segments of the show, links to his social pages, and more information about his firm, projects, and media in the show notes. If you enjoyed our discussion, please let us know. Continue the conversation with me across all social platforms and become a part of the Ultimate Gamer community today by subscribing at ultimategamer.com. We release 2 shows a week on Tuesday and Thursday, so be the first to join us for some outstanding upcoming guests and or dive back into the library of previous Level Up pods to hear some of the most brilliant minds in the space. Experts like gaming media personality Gerard Hip Hop Gamer Williams, Director of Corporate Partnerships at the Houston Outlaws, Herb May, and CEO of The Ultimate Gamer, Steve Suarez, just to name a few. You can find all these episodes and more on the Ultimate Gamer website, on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your pods. And finally, please like, rate, and review the show. It helps us to reach the gaming community, to spread the word, and share the wisdom of our guests, as well as some of the most thought-provoking stories in the industry. Shout out, as always, to The Ultimate Gamer. I look forward to being with you on the next Level Up Podcast.